Let's dive into one of the most baffling and, honestly, heartbreaking unsolved cases in modern American history. It's often called the American Dyatlov Pass, for a reason. This is a story that has way more questions than answers, a mystery that kicks off with a simple night out and ends deep, deep in the wilderness.
So here's the setup, and it sounds so simple. On February 24th, 1978, 5 young men, all really close friends, just head out for a fun night. But they never came home. Their disappearance would kick off a massive search and uncover a series of clues that just defy any logical explanation.
All right, so where does a story like this even begin? Well, it started with something they all loved, a shared passion in a game they were really looking forward to. Let's go back to that final night these 5 men were all seen together.
To their families, they weren't the Yuba County Five. They were just the boys. They were this really tight-knit group of friends from Yuba County, California. Now, most of them had mild intellectual or psychiatric disabilities, and their absolute favorite thing in the world was sports. They even played together on a basketball team, the Gateway Gators, and they were so incredibly excited for their own Special Olympics tournament that was scheduled for the very next day.
Okay, so let's break down what we know for certain happened that night. Jack Madruga, he's the driver, takes the group in his 1969 Mercury Montego about 50 miles to watch a college game. After it's over, around 10 p.m., they make a stop at a local market. The clerk there remembered them pretty clearly because they came in right as she was closing up. They bought some snacks, some drinks, got back in their car, and then they were just gone.
So when the guys didn't come home, their families got worried, and a search kicked off. And the very first thing they found? Well, it wasn't just a clue. It was the start of a whole new mystery.
The discovery of their car, Madruga's Montego, only made things stranger. It was found a few days later on this remote, winding mountain road, a full 70 miles from Chico, way, way off their route home. And I mean, nothing about it made any sense. You'd think it was broken down, right? Nope, started right up. Out of gas? Not at all. It had a quarter tank left. Stuck in the snow? Yeah, a little bit, but investigators were sure 5 healthy guys could have pushed it out no problem. And maybe the weirdest part, the undercarriage had no damage, no scrapes, no dings, despite being on this really rough road.
So this is the first huge question mark hanging over everything. Why on earth would they leave a perfectly good car, with the window rolled down and the doors unlocked, by the way, to just start walking into a cold, dark, and totally unfamiliar forest? It just made absolutely zero sense.
And if that wasn't strange enough, listen to this. There was another guy, Joseph Shones, who was actually stranded on that same road that night. He was having a mild heart attack in his car. He told police he saw headlights pop up behind him and heard a group of people talking, he thought maybe with a woman and a baby. He yelled out for help, but they just went silent and turned off their lights. A little later, he heard flashlights, called out again, and poof, the lights went dark again. Was this the Yuba County Five? And if it was, why in the world would they ignore a man crying out for help?
Because of the heavy winter snows, a full-scale search was basically impossible. For months, there was just nothing. No new leads. Then, as the snow started to melt that June, the awful truth of what happened up in those mountains began to emerge.
It all started on June 4th. The body of Ted Weeder was found inside a Forest Service trailer. And get this, the distance from their car was just staggering. Over 19 miles, a brutal trek through deep snow. The very next day, the remains of Madruga and Sterling were found along that same route. And a couple days after that, what was left of Jack Hewitt was discovered. For all of them, the cause of death was hypothermia.
So finding the bodies answered the what for 4 of the men. But the scene inside that Forest Service trailer where Ted Weir died, well, it only created a new, deeper mystery. A paradox that, to this day, investigators still can't wrap their heads around.
What they found inside that trailer is maybe the most mind-bending part of this entire story. Investigators found that someone had opened and eaten about 36 cans of old military sea rations. But a nearby locker held a huge supply of dehydrated food, enough to keep a person alive for a year, and it was completely untouched. And it gets crazier. There were matches, there were paperback books for kindling, and a propane tank that could have heated the entire trailer. None of it was used. There was even heavy forestry clothing just left in storage. And the result of all this was just horrific. Ted Weir had wasted away, losing nearly 100 pounds. He died from starvation and hypothermia inside a shelter full of food and potential heat.
From the growth of his beard, they think he survived in that trailer for an incredible 8 to 13 weeks. He suffered alone, freezing and starving, literally surrounded by everything he needed to live.
And here's another twist. It looks like Ted wasn't alone in there, at least not the whole time. Gary Mathias's tennis shoes were found inside the trailer. And remember those C rations? They were opened with a P38 can opener, which is a specific military tool, something only Mathias or Madruga, the two Army vets in the group, would have known how to use. The theory is that Mathias was there with Ted, maybe even taking care of him, before he also vanished.
All right, so 4 men found, 1 still missing. What on earth actually happened out there? Let's take a look at the most common theory investigators have come up with and all the questions it just can't seem to answer.
So the leading explanation goes something like this. The men took a wrong turn, maybe trying to visit a friend, and got their car stuck. Then they decided to follow tracks from a snowcat, hoping it would lead them to help. 3 of them, Madruga, Sterling, and Hewitt, just couldn't handle the elements and died on that long, cold walk. Wyhair and Matthias made it to the trailer, but maybe, out of fear they'd get in trouble for breaking and entering, they hesitated to use all the supplies. But, as you can probably guess, this theory is just riddled with holes. Why would they abandon a working car? And would the fear of getting arrested really be stronger than the will to survive?
And all of this brings us to the final, haunting question. What happened to Gary Mathias? His shoes were left behind in that trailer, but he was never, ever found. Did he leave Ted to try and find help, only to die somewhere out there in the vast wilderness? Or did he somehow survive and just start a new life somewhere else? His fate is a complete and total mystery.
So in the end, we're left with this question that has haunted people for decades. Was the fate of the Yuba County Five just a tragic domino effect of bad decisions made by vulnerable men in a terrifying situation? Or do all the bizarre details, the working car, the witness they ignored, the untouched supplies, point to something more sinister? Something that involves someone else? It's a question that, nearly half a century later, we still can't answer.